Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at Sobek 2 Players, which, believe it or not, is a 2-player only board game designed by Bruno Cathala and Sebastian Pauchon. This one takes around 20 minutes to play on average. Before I get into my thoughts on Sobek, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, Kienda.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer here in the UK, and if you use my link in the show notes or the cheeky QR code there, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so a game of Sobek 2 Players is going to look like this. We have this main board which has been filled up with all these tiles. Now there's two types of tiles. You've got these good ones, which are all these different kind of resources and livestock and things. And you also have these character tiles which have been placed face down. Now the character tiles are all referenced on this very useful little player sheet here, which shows what all the different powers do, and so you know what to use when they come up. You've also got these bonus tiles or tokens which have been placed to the side of the board here. So there are 5 of these which will be acquired by the players when they end up taking an action to sell goods, but we'll talk about that later. And there's also some bonus tokens here which can come into play if certain characters are activated. You've also got a bag full of Deben tokens here. Now these are like bonus coins you can get, which are worth victory points at the end of the game. Each player is going to start with a couple of starting tiles. And you're also going to have one of these little tiles here to show where your corruption tiles will go. And we'll talk about what that means later. You've got this Ankh piece, which is going to be used to navigate the main board. You've got the tile stack and so on. Okay, so how does the game actually work? So first turn in the game, the first player is going to start wherever they want on this middle square here. And they can place this Ankh on one of those tokens. So let's just say I took this one here to start collecting this this hay or wheat, whatever it is. And then the player who took that is going to orientate the Ankh in the direction where these lines are. So you can see here on the tile I've just taken, it's got a horizontal line. So therefore the Ankh will orientate like so. Now what this means is that the next player can only ever move on a horizontal line. So let's just say they ended up going here, like so. So they'd land on that tile and then they would pick that one up and add it to their hand. Now you can see that one was pointed diagonally, so the Ankh would end up like this. Therefore the following player could move in a diagonal direction like so. So they might jump here like this and add it to their hand. And again, it would stay in that orientation. However, you do not actually have to take the first tile in that row or the direction that you're traveling. You can actually skip over tiles. So let's just say the following player chose to skip over this cow one because they're not interested and they go to this one like so. Again, they would take that into their hand as normal, but the one they skipped over, this one here, would go onto their corruption tile like so, and that can be worth negative points at the end of the game. So besides from moving the Ankh and collecting a tile and potentially corruption tiles, you can sell some goods. And when you do that, you're going to have at least 3 of the same type, or you can use these Sobek tokens as wilds. When you do that, you're going to have to collect those 3 tiles that you want to sell, or more. You know, there could be 4, 5, 6, no matter how many you want to spend, as long as it's at least 3, and you can sell them for end game scoring. Now, the way these score are that you're going to multiply the number of goods by the number of scarabs on that good, or on those goods. So at the moment, we've got 3 here, times 2. This is going to be worth 6 points at the moment. And also, whenever you take a sell action, as long as there are some available, you are going to have a look at these tokens here and utilize one of them. And these do all different kind of things. And you can actually look at any of them and take your pick, but let's have a look at what some of them do. Again, using this rather useful little sheet here. So you've got this like pyramid one here that lets you take a full turn again. You've got this one here where you can place this token on one of your previously sold sets corresponding to one of the 3 types shown. It adds 2 scarabs to that set, so it makes it a lot more valuable. You've got this one here that adds all the tiles currently on your corruption board back into your hand, so you can actually sell them rather than potentially suffer negative points. I got this one here that gives this tokens to your opponent, and they must keep it close to their corruption board, and it counts as extra corruption points. You got this one here that's just simply worth 7 points. This one here where it says you can keep this token and it grants you 2 points at the end of the game. Also, you get to draw a Deben token from the bag, and we'll talk about the Deben tokens shortly. This one here lets you draw 2 Deben tokens and keep 1. And this one here lets you place this token on a tile of your choice amongst the ones in the line indicated by the orientation of the Ankh. And I believe your opponent has to take that one. So you can also see that some of these tiles have a coin on them. And this is what the Deben tokens refer to. So if you ever end up taking one of those tokens and say you was not really interested in starting to build up one of those sets, you can sacrifice that tile in order to draw from the bag here. And these bags are going to contain tokens which look like this, and these range in values from 3 to 9, I believe. So there's quite a swing in the value of points that they are worth. Now, the third and final thing you can do on your turn is to use one of these character tiles. So let's just say, for example, in a previous round, this player would have taken this one and taken this character tile. They would have had it in their hand, but it's going to take a whole turn to use it. So you can either use it for its ability, which we'll talk on in a minute, but you can also use it as a goods type. So you can see that all these characters have a particular type of good there. So you can actually put it in a little set here to sell it rather than utilize its ability. And all the character tiles abilities are on this sheet here. So you've got this architect that lets you randomly draw 3 of these tokens and use one, essentially. You've got this high priest here, which lets you remove some of the tiles on your corruption board from the game. You can either choose between all the Sobek statues, including the architect, or all the tiles of a single goods type. So it lets you shed some of your potential corruption. You've got the courtesan here that lets you add 1 or 2 tiles from your hand to a previously sold set of tiles. The merchant lets you take any tile currently available anywhere on the market into your hand without moving the ankh or taking any corruption, and so on. So you can see what these kind of things are going to do. Now, if there's ever a time where you cannot take a legal move, then you are going to have to replenish the board back up with the remaining tiles. However, if there are no tiles left in the stack and nobody can do a legal move, then the game is going to end, and then final scoring is going to get calculated. So at the end of the game, you're going to work out points as follows, bearing in mind that you would actually have more tiles in this. I've just used this as an example. So of course, you're going to multiply your goods by the scarabs on them, and these are the ones that you've already sold. So you can see here, this is going to be 3 times 6 for 18 points, because it's 3 goods types times the 6 scarabs on them. This one here, again, is going to be 3 times 2 for 6 points. This one here is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiles times 2 scarabs. So that's going to be 10 points. You're going to add any of these Debon tokens, and also if you have any tiles left in your hand and you can make a set of them, you are going to just discard them. However, if you do not have a full set, they are going to go into your corruption pile as follows, and then corruption is going to get worked out. Now, the way that the corruption works is that you are going to calculate how many tokens you've collected as corruption as the game goes on, or tiles I should say, and compare it to your opponents. So this player here has 5 corruption, and this player here has 8, I've worked it out as. And the player who has the fewest, or the least amount of corruption, is going to draw a bonus Sobek tile and add it to their final scoring tally, like so. And also, for every 3 tiles that you have less than your opponent, so again, this player has 8, this player has 5, you're going to get to draw another Debon token. So you're already incentivized to try and at least stay level with your opponent to stop giving them that luck of the draw. Okay, so now we know how to play Sobek. Let's share some thoughts on the gameplay and some of the core mechanisms here. And let's start with the orientation of the ankh, because I think this is a really neat idea. Wherever you take from, not only are you going to, of course, collect that good, but you are going to always kind of lay the foundation for your opponent's turn. And you want to be using that quite carefully, because you don't want to be leaving them core opportunities or key opportunities to grab the tiles they want. If they're really collecting cows, you don't want to make it easy for them to get cows, or at least if there is going to be a cow in their path, you want to be making sure they're jumping over other tiles so that they start gaining corruption, which I think is a really neat idea. So not only do you have to worry about what you're doing, you also have to worry about what your opponents are doing and what opportunities you're leaving them. And you can actually use some of the other facets of the game to your benefit to kind of manipulate that, because if you have character tiles in your hand, like this one for example, it's going to take your whole turn to use it. Therefore, that you know that your opponent's going to have to take 2 turns in a row basically to move the ankh, which can work in your benefit. if there's no goods that you wanted at all, you might want to force your opponent to move it, so therefore you can take the next turn, which could be a better opportunity, and tailor more towards your own personal strategy and your own sets that you're trying to collect. And that also ties into the selling mechanism because, you can use this selling mechanism as another stalling method to make your opponent move the Ankh when you don't want to. But also that comes with a kind of double-edged sword, really, because you want to be selling things relatively early in sets of 3, when you first collect that set of 3, so that you can get the benefit from one of these bonus tokens, because these can be pretty damn useful and work to your benefit. However, you have to be quite careful not to always sell them as soon as you get a set of 3, because you are taking a big risk, because you can only ever sell them at least in a set of 3, meaning that if you sell a set of 3 and then you only end up collecting 2 more, that's going to count as corruption points at the end of the game. So it might be worth or equally useful to to save up all your goods tiles and then sell them as one big group to again mitigate that risk of having those remaining pieces and potentially costing you endgame scoring. Now, the corruption mechanism itself is a really cool idea. I generally love the idea of kind of risk and reward, really wanting something that suits your strategy perfectly, but to do that, you're going to have to sacrifice something else. For example, if I really wanted this Sobek tile, I'll grab it. I really want another one, so I jump onto this one, but I end up taking this one as corruption. So I love that idea. However, this is something that I didn't find influenced the game as much as I would have liked or hoped to. From the games I've had of this one, it always seems like we played it relatively conservatively and ended up taking very few corruption tiles. However, that is completely player driven, so this is my own personal experience, and I'm sure if you have more risk-taking style players who aren't scared of taking that corruption, then that's going to equally influence the other player because they're going to have that more wiggle room and leeway to take corruption themselves. So it is a player-driven thing, which can really swing the game. And on top of all that, I actually do really like the scoring mechanism in this game, multiplying the goods by the scarabs on those goods, and that means things have different worth. If you are collecting a bunch of the same tiles, but you have hardly any scarabs, then, that's going to be worth next to nothing for you. So you're going to have to really go for where the scarabs are. And I also do quite like the flexibility that you can use the characters, not only for their ability, but also for the good on them. Gives you more flexibility and can, again, give you some, back you out of a corner sometimes if you really need that third piece for a set. So we've talked about a lot of the positives here. Let's touch on a glaring negative, at least in my opinion, and to be honest, I think most people would agree with this, and that is the swinginess of these Deben tokens, because they do value in ranges from 3 all the way up to 9, meaning that I could do the exact same thing as you do. I get 9 points, you get 3 points. And as the game goes on, yes, the probabilities will say that they'll probably balance out. However, that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes I could take a couple of Deben draws, I could get the 8 and the 9, you could get the 3 and the 4. Through no fault of your own, I've gained a big net gain on you, and that could quite easily determine the winner. And that, for me, considering this is essentially an abstract strategy game, it feels really jarring and very deflating, even if it works for or against you, because you didn't do anything to earn those extra points. And something that's less objective and more subjective to my own personal tastes, I'm not quite sure I enjoy the mix of the kind of player powers and bonus tokens with such an abstract strategy game. I tend to like abstracts to be as simple and as pure as possible, because you can so, deterministically do what you want to do and know how that affects other people. But when there are these face down character tiles, someone's going to land on them and then they're going to do something that you just couldn't predict, and it's going to completely mess with, your predictability of the game. Now, I understand that that's what Cathala is kind of known for. He has that kind of spiciness of all the different characters into his games. That's probably why I tend not to get on with this game so well. But again, that's more of a personal thing. I just think the hybrid of the wackiness of the characters with the abstract strategy nature of it just doesn't quite sit right for me. And despite some of those criticisms, I do have to give the game a bit of grace, because it does only take around 20 minutes to play, and the level of depth here in relation to that time frame is pretty damn good. So even if you are a bit disgruntled because of a lucky tile draw or something, you're not going to hold too much malice against the game, because it is a simple, quick filler. The production for this game is fantastic, to be honest. The Ankh piece is nice and chunky, nice wooden. The tiles themselves are really good quality. They have this kind of glossy finish to them, and all the artwork on them is rather charming, and it looks very pretty when it's on the table. Just a good quality, well-polished product. The same goes for the bag. The player aids are really good, nice and useful to put on the table for people to use. And I believe on the reverse side of one of these, you've got the score track as well to help you calculate those points at the end of the game. Okay, so let's get into some final thoughts for Sobek two players. Now I'm going to come straight out and say that this game isn't really for me. However, 90% of that is due to subjective taste. Because to be honest, I think objectively the game is very well designed. If you are a fan of abstract strategy games, this one is definitely a top-notch one. And if you like that kind of added spiciness of the player powers and tokens and things, you're going to get a lot from it. And this is definitely one of those games where if you have two players who enjoy the game and you are consistently playing it with each other, you are really going to raise each other's game, and you're going to start getting more and more from it as you start to read the board a bit better and be really careful about each opportunity you leave your opponent. Because yeah, this is very deterministic in a lot of ways. You can pre-plan things and can be very savvy and use a lot of intrigue to really ramp up the tension of the gameplay. Now that being said, I do think there's an objective criticism here about the swinginess of the Devon draws. I think that this is quite an easy house rule, just make all the tokens to fixed value. But yeah, I think most people would agree with me on that. It just feels a bit, again, very deflating if you are just getting completely shafted through no fault of your own by drawing all those low tiles. But everything apart from that works as it should. It's smooth, it's fast, there's some good decisions here. I like the scoring method. The corruption mechanism is cool, especially if you're both willing to go for it and kind of compete with each other with that corruption rather than completely being so risk adverse not to tamper with that style of the game. But yeah, I can certainly see why this would be up there for a lot of people in terms of quick two-player games, because that ratio of gameplay to the time it takes is spot on, to be honest. Now, that being said, Cathala games are generally, I've mentioned before, generally don't gel well with me because I don't like all the player powers and things. And I do actually think that Cathala has made a couple of games that do this thing but a bit better, and that is the reason for that is because all this part is stripped out. So again, more a personal thing, but the games I'm talking about are a rather simple game called Okia, and also a Game of Thrones themed game called Hand of the King, where you're moving this piece up and down these rows, collecting things for sets. Those are a bit more pure and a bit more to my tastes. I can definitely see why people would prefer this one to those other games, because it does have a bit more flavour going on, just a bit more to sink your teeth into. So yeah, I can't really criticise it too much. It's just a personal thing that's going to prevent me from playing it much more. But yeah, I think if you like the look of this one and a lot of the kind of elements of the gameplay are up your alley, then you're probably going to like it quite a bit. So that is Sobek, 2 players.